Resume recording. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and so much a special thank you to Freddie, who's joining us from the West Coast at 8:04 a.m. to be on this Saturday morning breakfast chat. Freddie and I have known each other for a long time, and he and I share a common love of all things Anne Craven, which is why I asked him to join me this morning to talk about this new body of work that Anne is sharing with us digitally. I want to just start, and I thought since we both are here because we have a really personal connection to the artist, I thought we could each start by sharing how we got to know Anne, and how, you know, Freddie, how long have you known Anne's work?
Well, I was actually just thinking, preparing for this, that I think Anne was one of the first people I met when I moved to New York to move in with John. So that was like maybe 2007 or something like that. Yeah, she's just been such a, loving person from like the first time I've met her. Oh, there she is. Hi, Anne. Do you remember those days, 2007?
I do. It was really great to have you in New York City and meeting you and seeing, you at John Conley Presents. That was the first time I met you.
Exactly, yeah.
And you were just sunshine. And you still are.
You too. We also, it reminded me too that Anne had done one of those street fairs that, what are they called? Sorry, I'm blanking on their name.
The kitchen. Did I draw you?
Yes. Well, no, you drew Otto, John's dog.
Right.
So that's one of our. That's like our Anne Craven.
Right. I drew Otto. That's right. I got a text from you guys at one point.
Yeah. So I think it was an exciting time to be in New York, and so many artists, of course, around John's gallery, and Anne was always at all the parties, and we always had such a great time. And then when did Peter have the show in Santa Barbara? I feel like maybe that's like 4 or 5 years ago.
It was 4 or 5 years ago, yes. And it was at the Santa Barbara Museum, and it was incredible. Thank you so much for being such a great host to us there and helping, everything, to see the beach and to see nature.
Exactly. Yeah. So they had just been like so busy working on the show, and they've just been board members and at the museum, and I'm like, you haven't even like gotten to the beach?
You haven't seen the beach yet? You haven't seen what was it called? The Black Beach.
Guys, I'm gonna interrupt you.
We're going down memory lane here.
Information. I love it. I love the Freddie and love. So just for everyone that's joining us and might not know Freddie, this is Frederick Janka. He's executive director of the Carolyn Glasgow Bailey Foundation in Ojai, California. When we first met, Freddie was with Sculpture Center in New York. And his partner, John Connolly, I'm going to give a little more background so everyone knows what you guys are talking about. John had an incredible gallery, John Connolly Presents, and now you guys are both California-based, doing amazing work out there, supporting artists with the foundation, living in Santa Barbara. And Anne, incredible Anne Craven, joining us from Maine, where she is, I think, in her house, not in the studio this morning.
I'm in my house, but I'm in my studio clothes. I've been in the studio most of the morning, but came over to get the Wi-Fi.
Yes, I love it. So we've all known each other.
Our Magic and Moonlight. Where's Magic and Moonlight? Where are the babies?
Oh, they're very much right here.
Oh.
So you're wondering what's going on.
what Freddie and Anne were talking about is a part of Anne's practice that not a lot of people know about are her portraits and her pet portraits. And we're going to look at a couple of pieces that are from Anne's more iconic series, the birds, the moons, the flowers, but we're also going to look at a couple of watercolors, the kitties, the horses. And I've had a few people who we've shared this kind of digital exhibition with say, I didn't know Anne made this other work. And so you guys were talking a little bit about the portraits, which were, Anne, tell us about the street fair portraits.
Well, it was the kitchen benefit auction, and I just decided I was going to set up shop and draw people and pet portraits. And, you know, they raised money for them, and each portrait I don't know how they made money, but they made money on it. Great. And I must have, the line was so long, and I drew everybody from the puppy, from John and Freddie's puppy. What was his name? Janka? Otto, yes. To Amy Silman and gosh, they're floating around in my life. Sometimes I get a text from somebody that reminds me that I did them. And then, you know, I did another series of portraits for the Sculpture Center. Freddie, were you working then? I did the back room at the big gala where Franz West was the honoree, and he was in a bed, and he couldn't make it.
Oh yes, I remember it. Yeah. That was
So
before.
yeah, and I was in the back painting portraits of anybody who purchased a portrait, and I must have painted 12 portraits that night, and small but fast and very very intense, because, you know, at the same time I want to get the likeness, but at the same time it's a painting, so I want to make sure that it's just what it is. And it's really just a documentation. But for me, my portrait series that I've been working on that I've hardly shown, and I painted Nina Johnson as well, is another diary in my work. It's a diary of who I've talked to, who I've spent time with, who I've made sense to paint, just because they're coming through my life at that moment. And, you know, sometimes they're accelerated and I paint 5, 10, maybe a year, or sometimes 20 a year. So they're a secret. I don't show them, but I will eventually, because they are now like another diary, another moon. If not, they are a moon. It's the same. It's only, you know, I'm looking at a person instead of the moon.
So,
well, and I think that's light. I think that, you know, I think
Yeah.
people you see people's light, and I think that is what you're talking so much like the moon. And the moon paintings are, you know, one of my favorite all-time series of yours. I just, you know,
Thank you.
so dream. And this one too in the show, the pink, and it's the lover's moon. I mean, if this isn't sold already, someone get on this, because it's just dreamy.
I'm here. You're like, get on this, people. Call them out.
But you know, I think, yeah, I like this you know, theme of a diary, and you know, it's ritual, and you know, it's really about time passing, and I love that you're able to sort of, you know, go back into your studies and you know, rework and reproduce, and I think again, it sort of brings back that light, right? It sort of like taps back into that time that you were there, but is marked again with a new, you know, perspective, and whatever you're feeling that day, right?
Well, exactly. And, you know, at times revisiting a subject matter brings me to tears. It's almost like I can't paint it, because it reminds me of the time that I was painting it. It might have been 5 years ago, or, you know, there might have been something, you know, like a death or love, or, you know, wonderful things, or sad things. But it's really an emotional adventure for me to revisit. And I do revisit because of really important reasons, and they're never the same, but they're really, they really have my heart and soul into it, or I can't paint it. That's just that. It's weird.
Tell everybody, including Freddie, a little bit. So typically when Anne paints the moon, she does the moon studies, little moons in plein air in various locations, sometimes in New York, sometimes in Maine, sometimes in Connecticut. But for this show, talk about the idea of revisiting an image, which is a consistent in your work. Tell everybody what we did, what you did for this group of work, how you arrived at these, images and what these images are.
Yeah, it's let me just plug in and make sure I'm getting juice here. I'm gonna lose you. Here we go. Come on. My phone is old and it's not. I'm gonna try it a little bit. Oh, come on. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, so to answer, I mean, we decided to paint 5 paintings, and the flowers are recent right away. I mean, the flowers are either, they're always alive when I paint them, and they're either from the grocery store or they're from the garden or they're weeds. But the good thing is that they are, again, plein air, and it's like the moon, plein air, meaning that I'm looking at that flower and I'm looking at that moon, and I'm painting it. And so like any artist who paints a painting is going to use that as subject matter for a larger work. So there's nothing new to that. I can't claim anything to it. It's just what you do when you're a painter. And but the birds have always been something that is this long conceptual project. And it's not easy with bringing conceptual ideas into oil painting, because you always get bit in the ass. It's just like, why are you painting? What conceptual? Why? It's a bird. But it's really about a long process of process, and trying to figure out subject matter when you're a young artist. Like, I've been painting since I was 6 years old with oils, because my grandfather was a roofer, and they didn't care about solvents, and I could use turpentine and oil, no problem. They taught me, it wasn't kerosene. They let me wash my hands in kerosene. I mean, it was, you'd get arrested now if you were a parent, letting your child work with oils. So I know oils like it's my blood, I don't know anything else. And I get older and I need subject matter. And what do you paint? Either you keep painting plein air and draw and what you did as a kid, which I painted everything my mother put in front of me, or you try and figure it out because you're more interested. I was interested in Agnes Martin and Kenneth Noland, and I didn't know why, but I had to figure it out. And the moon was more of an avenue into the conceptual side, because the moon was always the same, but always different, and always going to be there for everybody, access to everybody. It wasn't just mine. And it was a date and a time where I could map myself. But the birds just became a similar project because I just made it. I loved the birds. I loved seeing birds in old books, and I knew I could mix my observation painting, that I look to paint flowers, to paint the moon, with these mediated bird images, and sort of collage them together and, see what happens. And that's where we're at now still. I have probably 10 or 15 subjects of birds, and they all have the similar titles, and a title that I revisit. In this case, in this body of work, the 5 paintings, or is it 6 paintings, is Farrah Fawcett bird.
I want to, talking about the bird, you sort of like just touched on this when you mentioned your mom, but I think it's relevant, Freddie, to the work you're doing now as well. The foundation that you're with was created in memory of somebody, a beloved patron and friend, and in the memory of her commitment to the arts. And you and I have shared a lot of similar loss and share a lot of this kind of commitment to memory. And, you know,
Exactly.
when Anne was my professor in college.
At the music school, and Nina is a really talented artist, so don't let her fool you.
Secrets revealed. When I first started working with you, you were repainting images of works that had been lost in a fire, and you know, this idea of recreating the memory, revisiting the memory. It's almost like you know, this sort of therapeutic method of going back into something so deeply to exercise it, you know, to kind of get it out. And Farrah Fawcett bird is an image that this is the second or third, I think.
This would be the fourth.
Fourth.
1, 2, 3. This is the fourth of this one that has a lot of similarities and variations that are, you know, I tweaked. But the memory part, Nina, what you're saying is very important, because it is revisiting a memory for me. It's revisiting a person, because a lot of times my paintings are an entity to me, and it's like revisiting somebody that's actually passed, and have that sort of place. It's both wonderful and scary at the same time. And yeah, our loss. Ooh, yeah, we've had a lot of loss in our lives, Nina, but we've had a lot of love too, and a lot of things that remain constant. And so I feel, in a way, I have the right to revisit something, even though it's never the same painting, but it's like revisiting a song, singing a song again in a different venue, a musician, you know, but with definite changes.
I think
and then look at what Bob Dylan did to his songs. I mean, that's incredible.
I think of this thing that Bruce Springsteen says about playing his hits. Like, don't you get sick of playing your, you know, Born in the USA or whatever? And he says, no, those songs gave me everything, you know, gave me the whole world. Freddie, tell us a little bit about the foundation and the way you guys are dealing with memory and kind of honoring loss and memory through the work of artists.
Well, I think maybe the best way to sum it up is that, you know, sometimes I get questions like, oh, well, you know, especially people who knew Carolyn, like, oh, what would Carolyn do, or what would Carolyn think? And I think I've moved past that, and it's more about, you know, she was a passionate supporter of artists. And so, you know, that's very much where we sort of, you know, came together. And so that's really the ethos that I keep when thinking about projects and how we're working with artists. And I think so much of it is about sort of long-term engagement and holistic engagement, like really, you know, caring about artists and caring about people. I think hospitality is a really important element of just our daily practice as an institution. You know, I think it's really in sort of the first few months of quarantine, I was talking through with one of my donors about, like, well, what is it like, what's the essential like elements of what we're doing, and I came up with this idea that it's you know, Ojai is a special place, artist is special person, we bring the two together, and then, you know, that chemistry then determines everything else that we do, you know, whether it's, you know, our podcast or programs or donor events or whatever, you know, that it really is, we're artist responsive. And so I think in terms of legacy, that's what we're really, or that's how I see it. You know, I think it's hard to, it's hard to tell a story every time you address the foundation, you know, that Carolyn died of glioblastoma brain cancer at 46. You know, that's a hard story. Actually, I will do a plug right now. Her sister, Lila, has just published a book, and it's called Situation, A Radical Journey Through Sisterhood. And you can get this on Amazon Bookshop, wherever, and a percentage does benefit the foundation. And it is really a real story of, you know, from a sister's perspective of the process of losing somebody and the grieving process, as well as interspaced the book with chapters about them growing up in Minneapolis. And so I think it's it would actually, I mean, when you talk about how do you live with grieving and loss, I think it's a really interesting, and it's a great read. It's a very compelling read. I'd encourage you know, you to check it out.
I'm definitely getting it. I can't wait.
I think that's a really beautiful segue into why, and we felt it was important to show these paintings right now. You know, Anne and I have been speaking throughout quarantine about kind of responsibility or voice, or like occupying space. And, you know, throughout the past several months, obviously we're all experiencing this massive collective grieving, you know, 200,000 lives, but also the kind of grief for a culture that's been lost and likely not to be reclaimed in any familiar sense in the future. And I think a kind of dignity to our culture as Americans that I think will be very difficult to reclaim going forward, if ever. And I have kept, you know, Anne, you by nature are, you know, you're an artist, you're a painter since you were 6, right? So like, this is what you do. You turn to these objects and you paint the moon and you paint flowers and you paint, you know, and you like work it out, you know, you work it out. I love, this is one of my favorite images, because it's just like your brain just laid out on the table and all your kind of heart and soul in your order, from yellow all the way around, the way we lay out the palette. And I, you know, but at the same time, we've kind of been asking this question of who deserves to have a voice right now, right? Like, how do we solve that, you know, and how are artists helping us process this moment? And I think it's one of the reasons why your work has felt so pertinent to me, because the kind of repetition and the memory and the feeling of, you know, sort of, Freddie, what you're talking about is legacy, right? And like, you don't want the legacy of loss to be just grief. You want it to be hospitality and warmth and beauty and poetics. And I think, you know, that's so much what, and you do in this work. It's like you take that, the loss, the kind of melancholic aspect of memory, and you translate it into this object that is, you know, just like this, you know, and it's so much kind of bursting with that feeling, and it allows us to make sense of these intense emotions in the most abstract kind of way, you know, in this very emotional way. And I loved, Freddie, hearing you talk about hospitality. I love that idea, you know, that like you kind of let it be, right? You're sort of, tell us, you guys started to touch on when Anne and Peter came to Santa Barbara, right?
I think that that's a great example. I mean, I believe strongly in a sense of radical hospitality, and you know that you know, and I think this comes, you know, in institutional perspectives. What's happening right now, what we're seeing across the country, is that, you know, these really strong divisions between, you know, front of house staff, you know, leadership teams, executive teams, the board, and there's all these divisions and divisions and divisions. And I think, you know, it's to welcome everyone to the table with an equal voice, I think is so important for just the art world moving forward. You know, and so yeah, so I was working at the Museum of Contemporary Art at the time, and Peter Halley had the show at Santa Barbara Museum of Art, and I'm you know, texting with Anne. I'm like, so what have you guys been doing? I mean, that's always my thing too. Like, people come to town, I'm like, you know, we don't need to hang out, but what do you need? Where are you going? Who, like, what are you looking for? What's going, like, have you done this? Have you, you know, like, so it's just kind of part of my welcome to town, you know? And so we ended up doing a really great sunset, a sunset walk. I believe we started out at the Douglas Family Preserve, which is this beautiful cliff overlooking the water. And then we went down to the beach and got these last sort of that, what's it called in Anne? I think we were talking about it, but it's the French, I at least I learned it via French. So it, le rayon vert, the last, you know, the last light, the green ray of the sunset over the water is this, like, you know, sort of very quintessential romantic, like, moment of, and I think of time passing, and I felt like Peter really seemed to have enjoyed that time too, because he had, like, you know, put a show up and everything was, you know, he had his opening and everything was set, and you guys kind of, I felt like it was a wonderful sort of, you know, sigh of relief for you both, to be able to spend that time with you, and to also show you some of the natural beauty that has brought people to Santa Barbara for, you know, 100+ years. and then some. I mean, you have the Chumash who, you know, thrived here, but of course, you know, anyways, that's another conversation. Joey, I think my dog wants to come in. Oh, Anne, you're on mute. You're on mute, Anne.
Yeah, let's unmute Anne.
Unmute. Here I am.
Okay.
Oh, Freddie, that day was so important to us, and remembering the shadows too. At the French word that you just described also describes the long shadows that the sun makes when it's going closer to the horizon. And I remember dancing with our shadows on the beach and against that rock, those high rocks, and seeing those caves. And that was something we would never have done if it wasn't for you and John, because he came too, which was really great. But other than that, we were in Santa Barbara in this gorgeous, beautiful town. But it's so sad to think we would have missed that. And you know, oh, you always say, oh, next time, but you got to do it, and you make that happen. That's what you do, and you've always been that way ever since I met you. And it's a love of life that you have that not many people have. Yeah, I mean, you know, people have it, but you really you shine with it, and it helped us to actually see that beach, which is I'm walking on that beach right now in my mind's eye. It was really incredible.
I had to bring up the seagull friend because you guys talked
about that.
The seagull on the wall?
Yeah, tell us about the seagull watercolor. I want to click through some of these because we're going to.
Oh, I can't, how do I see them? I'm on my phone and I just have you and Freddie. Let me see. I'll go back. I think, oh, okay. I'm at the place now where I can just see the paintings.
Can you see the flower? We have the rose. So we have,
Yeah, the rose.
in this show, we decided to show some of the works on paper and some paintings. I think, for me, the watercolors have always been such an important part of the work. And I just want to hear a little bit, Anne, I'd love for you to share some of your thoughts on these three that we included.
Well, the seagull, the flower is the flower, and the seagull is a seagull flying. And there's a cat on the bottom, which is my Cat and Shelter series, which I started back again this summer, right at the COVID moment. I said, I got to go back to these cats and shelters that I've been saving for years, hundreds and hundreds of photos of cats and shelters with names and, how their characteristics and what color their hair is and why they should be adopted. But the cat is the ultimate symbol of solidarity, of solitude. The cat is such an independent soul, an independent animal, more so than dogs. So the cat was the first thing that I re-entered in the summer, early, well, not summer, March. And so that's Cami, and it's from a very old download from a shelter in Boston. Then when they finally went online, I just started downloading their images, and I have files of cats and shelter that I'm developing over the years. And so that's a Cami, and the bird, the seagull, I just had to paint. It was another sort of, I painted seagulls a long time ago, before college, I think, because my mother loved seagulls. And I painted seagulls flying, like you'd see at the mall. And I loved painting seagulls. But as I got older, it just seemed like they were territory that was dangerous, because there's so much in them. There's so much freedom in them. There's so much, it could even verge on the kitsch side, which my work I'm always fighting to to defend, because it's not about kitsch at all. It's really about this internal need to reconstitute life.
I love this in one of your books. This is kind of, I just love this conversation, and I think Freddie would probably side with me on this interpretation, but it's always the dichotomy of your work. In one of your books, there's one essay that talks about how sort of sly you are to use the kitsch, to kind of be in that space, that you're kind of it's written from a very cynical point of view, right? And then the other essay is totally the way I see your work, which is like, just cut your heart open, pour your guts out, like fully kind of like emotional and heartfelt and like really real, like that image of you and Freddie and John and Peter like dancing on the beach, and it's like, I think that tension, as much as I don't feel the cynicism because it's not me, but I like when other people see that in your work, because I think it's them, and it's like, that's what I love. I love when you talk about that and you're like, yeah, the seagull, he could be he could be almost that, but he's somehow not. And I think the flowers are such a good example of that, because you talk about buying them at the grocery store, that they're weeds or whatever. And then
those are the grocery store ones. Those are bought at a local grocery store up here. Yeah. And
Well,
the
I think what it is too is it's this constant push and pull, right? I mean, there's the flatness, but then there's the dimension of the object in the foreground. We kind of get like, oh, we're in a dream, we're in a memory, but no, we're out in the fields overlooking the water and the moon. And yeah, I think
mm,
it's interesting. In a way, you're sort of, it's kind of a trickster strategy too, in a fun, in a playful way, that like this is, you
think of it.
I, but I think like that's where the Anne Craven, the like that spark, I think there's a
Mm.
playfulness to it that is really genuine and authentic. And I think that's like that push and pull that that really resonates with me.
Push and pull is interesting. Yeah, it's a foreground and background. There's always a foreground and always a background. It's a collage. The birds and the flowers are always a collage. And Freddie, I think in the honestly, in the end, all my paintings and subject matter to start were geared towards what my mother and her friends would have liked and clapped to or acknowledged and said, "That's a good job." And in a way, you know, my mother wasn't um, uh, she wasn't very educated. She was educated in life. She was a teacher, but she wasn't educated in the arts. She really had no idea about why she liked what I did, except she loved what I did. And she pushed me to do it because she said I had talent. And so I just kept painting things that were in front of me, painted my life, and then realized I could paint from books. But I always gravitated towards the memory of like the wallpaper in my grandmother's house, or the fact that also my grandmother was Italian who didn't like birds or said she didn't like birds. And I found a bird book in her basement when she passed. So which became my subject matter for a few years, and is continuing because of me repainting similar images. And so there was an interesting twist there, like, my grandmother who thought birds were jinx, they're good jinx. So I thought, well, and I just thought birds were incredible to paint too, from the nature side. But yeah, I guess it's really about making an image and trying to figure out what to put in that on that surface.
It's
And
amazing. I mean, I do think it's amazing. We say to people when they ask about the different subject matter, like in some ways it's all the same
it's
painting,
all the same. It's all the same. Exactly.
you know?
Thank
It's
you.
all the same painting. Um, and tell us about the silhouette birds, because they're so different. They're so different.
Well, the silhouette birds started, they're probably back in 2002 was the first one I did. And it was to put a bird that was silhouetted on a ground that was either 2 or 3 colors, because the thing was I couldn't decide which color to use as a background. So I just started painting with 2 colors, and I call it my silhouette fade because I faded the colors into each other. But they really are a sunset. Just I didn't have the guts to call it a sunset back then. And so there's always two colors or 3 colors, flowers, and then the silhouette bird. The bird that's silhouetted against this sort of sky, or you know, uh, a sunset of such. And the cherries that are in the paintings, there's always cherries floating around, but when there's 3 at the top or 3 at the bottom that are near each other, that's a symbol of it's like a long discussion I have with my mother who's passed. It's my, it's like dot dot dot, it's eternity, it's like so on and so forth. You know, when you use a dot, dot, dot in a sentence, it means, you know, so on and so forth. But dot, dot, dot in my paintings means eternity, means, you know, I'm with you, Mom.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the clues. You know, these are clues for as much for the viewer as they are for you and the memories. So I think if anyone has questions, they could unmute themselves or raise their hand on the little button that says raise your hand. And Freddie, go ahead.
I just was going to jump in because you made me think of a cool question. And you know, maybe you've already alluded to this already, but thinking about your audience, like, do you have sort of an intended audience, a dream audience? Are there multiple audiences? Is it much more personal than audience? Like, it just made me think about, you know, as you're embedding these like sort of personal, you know, clues and symbols, like, are people intended to know that or not? You know, like, I don't know, I'm just curious when you're painting.
No, I don't know. That's interesting. I often, I don't know. I often think this is nuts what I'm doing. But I don't think about the audience. I shy away from the audience more so.
Well, there's actually something that a conversation I had with some artists recently about how, you know, the difference between, you know, audience, which does have sort of a performative assumption, and the sort of being a witness or bearing witness. And I think that this actually might be a case in point as well, where it's, in a way, you're bearing witness to time passing, revisiting memories, as almost part of your practice. And yeah, so yeah, I think I've kind of like come up with my own solution for that question. But I think it's interesting when you think about, as an artist, I think when you think about like who is looking at your work, I think I'm always very curious to how artists sort of see that.
I also think, as again, I paint for that audience of my mother. The kid, me, the child, never grows up. I believe I always think about the love that was there, and the trust in that what you're doing is okay. And the other thing is, when it's painful in a way that it seems like it's the wrong thing, then it's usually the right thing.
That to me a lot, Anne, in your work. I know that there's this, I love, Freddie, your question, because I know in Anne's work, there's this kind of push and pull between what she wants to share and what is secret or like held close. And it's like, I think for the audience, once you trust the audience, you let them in on the secret, but that often takes time. And I think in your work, that personal relationship, the way it's been built up with your audience, you know, over time, the audience that you trust gets bigger and bigger, right? Because they've seen more and more of the work. But I think of you also as a much younger painter, giving yourself permission to do these things, right? Like, it's okay to share this much of what I love. It's okay to share this much. And as the years have gone on, the decades of your practice, of this so dedicated practice, you've been more willing to open up those categories more to the audience. I think because you trust that they've seen the build up to this, you know, like they know you well enough to know that it is a sincere gesture and that they're not going to question your investment in this imagery, you know?
Yeah, I think everybody has a place that does gravitate towards things that are either uncomfortable or comfortable. It's the same thing, in a way. And you know, it's so interesting because the silhouette bird that's up right now, that is, I did make those in the beginning as a sort of test as to what I would do last in my life, as like a turning my back to the world and saying bye, thank you. You know, like Edward Hopper in the stage, his last painting that he made. So the silhouette birds it's another sort of, you know, planted seed to myself that I could revisit and have them be my last work. But, you know, that's a dark
day. It's a dark day. We don't want to think about that. We don't want to think about it, but it's so beautiful. It does make me kind of, it like, you know, hurts. It like leaves a little hole.
Well, at the same time, there are also these silhouettes that, you know, at school when you draw your silhouette and you put them on the wall. So the silhouettes have so much to do with everything in our culture. So, you know, it's silhouetting out.
I love it.
And I did paint some paintings without birds at all, with the branches empty. That was in 2004. Very interesting. Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions in the audience? I think if you can unmute yourselves. If you do have questions, I have a feeling everyone will be very shy. So Freddie, if you have another question.
Questions are just coming to me left and right. Maybe I'm channeling some other people's questions, I hope. I think what you just spoke to about the silhouette bird and your initial intention made me think about something I've been thinking about recently is how do artists think about their legacy? And how do you know, the importance of actually thinking about legacy before it's time to think about legacy, right? Like how, you know, like it makes me think about how does one, you know, archive and catalog one's work? How does one, you know, think about their impact after they're gone? How does, you know, whether it's financial or, you know, we look at these amazing artist foundations, right, that continue even in this crisis of artists that are happening right now. It's some of these, you know, Frankenthaler and Paula Krasner and you know, these institutions that are actually saving lives and providing support. So I guess, you know, sort of as you made me think about, and so perhaps in kind of a general sense, like, are there some ways that you're sort of thinking about, you know, just your legacy without, you know, because I think it's something that maybe people or artists, you know, try not to think about because it's maybe too self-aggrandizing, you know, but I think the reality is, you know, time passes. And so where does one's work and impact sort of lie in the future?
Well, I think that it's in the process of making a painting has similar roles in the making of paintings over one's lifetime. And so I would say the process is the most important part of an artist's or my work. And I think that translates into everybody's work ethic.
I think I wish we had a verso image of one of your paintings. Because when I see your versos, I know that you are thinking about legacy, right? Like
right. And yeah, and signing a painting has become really important to me because I need the back of the painting to have, well, first of all, my titles have dates. All my titles are dated, except for the watercolors, and other birds are not dated, but the titles of the moon, the titles of the palettes, the titles of the stripes, and a lot of the actually watercolors are dated. So another diary for me, always to be able to trace back when I did it and where I was. And so, yeah, that's the versos are, I always thought of anyway, the idea that someone could actually turn it over and see where it was painted was important to me at the time. Yeah.
I love
I
that.
love that. Yeah.
Right? It's so good. It's so good. And
Well, yeah.
I think of all your versos like in a book, you know, and just like turning the page, you know, seeing the painting and turning the page and seeing the verso on the back. Because it's another type of work, and it is part of your journaling, you know, and you're documenting your life for posterity. I mean, I think, Freddie, it's such a great question, right? Because artists do have this unbelievably profound impact, and also the least almost like self-awareness of it, right? Like in its future, if, you know, the Pollock Krasner, right? Like the best example, you know, ask those guys when they're like struggling to pay rent, how many decades of artists they'll enable to just like make work and stay with it and be in the, you know, I mean, it's just like unfathomable. You kind of picture him like holding his, you know, debt account with the local grocer for, but anyway, you guys, this has been so fantastic. I don't know.
So fun.
I don't know if I'm like doing something wrong and people can't unmute themselves to ask questions, or if they're being shy, but we will, this will be up. Oh wait, I see it. Someone has unmuted himself. Tony, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi, Ann. Thank you, Nina. This has been really, really helpful. I mean, I've seen your work in the past, and then I just got into the war. I don't know what it was. It was karma or something like that. And I finally got to sit down and learn about your practice. And I was just totally blown away about your commitment and the honesty of your paintings. And I just delved right into it all. But the question I have is, I was always curious about introducing a new character. When does that, not character, motif, does that happen? Are you tempted, or do you say, no, I must go back to one of my previous? And yeah, that would be my one question. How do you break, if you break that cycle?
No, it's so great to even utter that idea to myself. Is always scary because I'm a victim of repetition, repeating myself, and even you know, a new character is a new icon, which means it needs to fit in my comfort zone. So, or in my, if it looks good for me, it's not just that, it like I have to live with it too. I mean, there's the purple beech tree. That was my last oil painting icon that I brought into my work. You know, the tree that's like, it's a silhouette tree against a blue background. It's where the moon rises. It's actually right out front here. And it was as though the moon landed on my lawn, and you know, it was just hit me like a ton of bricks. I have to make this one of my icons. It makes sense. It was a bird, it was a moon, and it was something that hit my heart at the same time that I thought that this tree that sits on the corner of this river has seen so much life. It's 100 years old. Maybe Peter says it's 70. I don't know. It's like, it's old. And it's seen a lot of life. But to me, it's a tree was such a perfect icon to bring into my work, because trees bend with the winter. You learn to bend when you're a tree. You learn to survive or you fall over. This thing's huge. I can try and bring you guys outside so you can see it. And then what do you do with that if you don't if you don't like it? You just don't paint it again. But I did commit to it for a few years, and they're the Purple Beach. And then revisiting birds or revisiting subject matter, they're never the same, but it's like having a nice sandwich at lunch. You need to, feel like you can do it, but at the same time, it's what you do if you're an artist. I think everybody repeats themselves and does what they want.
Thank you so much, Tony. Such a good question, and I'm glad that you're able to kind of intro and practice this way, like get in there, because there's so much, right, Freddie? We've both been in there for a long time.
Yeah, I'm like, where are the palette paintings? I've always loved the palette paintings too. And
Well, the palettes are another diary, another way to, they really are only there for me to be able to see what I painted, because I'm mixing and mixing and mixing, and I'm painting a bird or painting a purple beech tree, or I'm painting the night sky, painting the moon. But the palettes were a way for me to take the paint off the palette and put them into a stripe formation next to each other without thinking about anything but just laying out the paint so that I could see it. It was like a color chart for me, because I couldn't see it when I was mixing it, because I've been mixing colors since I was 6. It's a lot of mixing, and I do it from a way that's unconscious. So to lay out the colors after in a stripe formation helped me to see what I painted. And then those are my stripe paintings, and the palettes were always there to revisit a color, to just do a color check, and to make sure that I'm mixing the right color if I'm revisiting a painting. But it's a dated time and it's a dated palette, so it's another diary. It's another form of, I imagine at some point you can just put them all together because of the date and have one long line all the way around a space.
Well, that was it 2016, the show at Nina's? We were in Miami doing Art Basel. Was it, or 2015, 2016?
I think it was 2015, Nina, right?
It was 2015, because there was another in between in 2017.
2017.
I think it was 15, because I remember we went by for a visit at some point. And yeah, I still remember that show. We had some stripe paintings, we had some moons, we had some palette paintings. Those are, some of my faves.
I like blue. It was called I Like Blue.
Yeah, it was a very blue. Yeah, I remember the overall sort of.
It was like evening blue, like that weird. The sun is gone, but the moon is not up yet.
Nina,
That's the twilight.
Does anyone have any other questions that wants to unmute themselves here?
Are there other people here? I can't even see them.
Yeah, there's a whole other people here. They're here. They're all cameras are turned off. But,
right now I just see me and Tony, and now I see me and Nina and Freddie. I'm on my iPhone, so
they're on here. All right, I don't think anyone else is gonna unmute, but you guys, thank you so much for this wonderful time together. It's so fun. It just feels like a good excuse to have this phone call with the two
Oh
of you.
my gosh, I love you guys.
I
So,
wouldn't do it for anybody else. I love you, Nina. You and Freddie, we go so far back. I wasn't even going to chime in. I was going to let you guys talk. I'm like, what the hell? I'm coming
I know,
home.
Freddie, you
Let's
brought
do
it
it.
out of Anne. Everyone, I just want to let everyone know that Anne said this morning, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to be a fly on the wall.
Nina, I wasn't even going to join. I was going to just hear about it later. You know, because I didn't, Zoom scare me, but now I'm fine.
you're a pro. You're a pro. You got it. You got it.
All right.
Friends, thank you so much, everyone. This will, we'll share it on the gallery page. So if you want to share it, you know, far and wide. And if anyone wants to see the digital exhibition, just reach out to us if you haven't already gotten it. So thank you so much again. Freddie, give our love to John, and Anne, give our love to Peter.
I will.
and
Love to John.
Let's all be
Love to the family.
soon together.
Yeah, we'll have to have a Zoom teeny or something. Bye, guys. Love you lots. Bye, Anne. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.